Welcome, dear listeners, to Sayers and Secrets, where shadows speak and every silence holds a clue. Tonight, Nero Wolfe enters into the mystery of the umbrella of midnight rain, where a storm-soaked stranger carries an umbrella dripping with secrets and a midnight death lingers beneath its canopy. Where in the world are you joining us from? Enjoy stories wrapped in riddles and secrets? You're in the right place. Subscribe to join the circle of seekers. Pour yourself something warm, draw the curtains close, and let's uncover the truth. At exactly 8:30 in the morning, the kitchen clock stopped ticking. Not a gentle fade-out, not a wheeze, not even a respectable death rattle. Just a flat stop, the way a thug might pull the plug on a jukebox mid-song. I noticed it because Fritz had laid my coffee on the table and pointed it out, with the kind of mournful sigh only a Swiss chef could manage, that breakfast had been delayed 3 minutes. Wolfe considers 3 minutes of lost time as serious as losing a world war, so naturally I was braced for fireworks. Instead, Wolfe didn't say a word. He just raised his eyebrows at the stopped clock, shifted his mountainous weight in the chair and returned to buttering his corn muffins as if time had graciously agreed to wait on his digestion. "Do you intend," I asked, "to let the house collapse around us while the laws of physics grind to a halt? Or are you planning to issue a warrant for Father Time's arrest?" Wolfe grunted, which in his dialect can mean anything from "Archie, you are insufferable," to "my orchids are more interesting than your drivel." Today's grunt leaned toward the latter. That was when the bell rang. The front bell, loud, insistent, the kind of ring that makes you think the caller either doesn't care about your nerves or hopes to ruin them. I opened the door and found trouble waiting, packaged in black silken rain. The visitor was a woman in her 40s, tall with the kind of figure that suggested she hadn't traded dinners for diets. Her hair was pinned up tight, her lips painted the shade of a withheld secret. But what stole the scene was the umbrella. Black as midnight, flecked with silver drops of rain. She clutched it like it was both weapon and witness. She didn't wait for my pitch. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe." Immediately I leaned against the doorframe. "You and half the free world. What makes you special besides arriving with props?" Her eyes flicked toward the umbrella. "It isn't a prop, Mr. Goodwin. It's the reason I'm alive this morning. Now, I've heard lines designed to get a detective's attention, but that one deserved applause." I ushered her in, noting that her heels clicked with the precision of a military drumbeat on the hall tiles. Wolfe didn't rise. He rarely does, unless the house is on fire or the beer supply is in jeopardy. He gave her a glance that covered her height, her poise, the umbrella, and filed it all under unwelcome. "Madam," Wolfe rumbled, "you have come unsummoned." "Why?" She held the umbrella like a confession. "Because last night under that rain, someone tried to kill me. And this," she lifted the umbrella so its dripping edge cast a dark arc across the rug, "is the only thing that stopped the blade." Fritz, from the kitchen, dropped a pan with a clang that would have scared a burglar into early retirement. I felt my eyebrows trying to join my hairline. And Wolfe. He closed his eyes, sighed and said, "Archie, remove that object. It drips." The umbrella leaned against the wall, casting a shadow across the parquet like a sundial, gone rogue. The woman took the red leather chair opposite Wolfe, still dripping herself, but this time words instead of rain. "I was told," she said, "that if anyone could keep me alive long enough to explain why I'm being hunted, it would be Nero Wolfe." I waited for Wolfe's answer, ready to note it in the mental ledger where I keep the collection of his grand refusals. Instead, he folded his hands, stared at her umbrella, and said something that tightened the room like a drawn noose. "Madam, if that story is true, then your umbrella is stained with more than rain." That was when I saw it. A dark streak along the fabric's edge, faint, dried, and not rainwater. Blood. and the clock on the wall, the one that had stopped, chose that exact second to start ticking again. The umbrella sat in the corner like it had been planted there to sprout trouble. I didn't touch it, not after Wolfe's remark about stains. I've seen too many cases where something you brush past turns out to be example. In court, and I wasn't volunteering to supply the fingerprints. Wolfe eyed it with the same expression he uses on Fritz when the sauce comes out clotted instead of smooth, and the woman sat rigid in her chair, eyes darting between Wolfe's mountain of calm and my restless pacing. She introduced herself as Mrs. Inez Vardell, and the name rang no bells. That wasn't unusual. Most of the people who land in our office aren't exactly household names unless you keep a scrapbook of social registers or police blotters. She was the kind of woman who could blend into a benefit dinner without turning heads, unless you counted the umbrella, which had already stolen enough spotlight for one morning. Wolfe didn't hurry her. He rarely does. His method is to let silence bloat until the visitor bursts like an overripe melon. Inez lasted all of 9 seconds before filling it. "Last night," she said, "I was returning from the Philharmonic. It was raining heavily. I had just reached the corner of my street when I felt someone behind me. I turned and saw the blade come down. Instinctively, I raised my umbrella. The knife caught there, slid, and the attacker fled. When I looked, there was blood on the fabric. That's picturesque," I said, leaning against the desk. "But I hope you're not expecting us to believe you didn't scream, chase, or at least get a license plate number." Her mouth pressed tight. "There was no car. Only footsteps retreating into the storm. I didn't scream. I froze. I was too startled. I believe that part." The faint tremor in her voice wasn't rehearsed. "Still, I've heard better stories in dime thrillers." Wolfe finally stirred. "And your umbrella, sir," he said. "You brought it here dripping." "Why not the police?" Her gaze dropped. "Because the police cannot be trusted." Now that's a line guaranteed to earn skepticism from Wolfe, who trusts fewer people than a cat trusts dogs. His eyes narrowed, which meant she'd scored enough interest to buy another 5 minutes. Inez leaned forward, lowering her voice. "This is not random, Mr. Wolfe. 2 nights ago, my husband died in his study. They called it natural causes, heart failure, but he was a strong man, too strong. I believe he was poisoned, and now someone means to remove me too." I whistled low. "That escalates quick. First we've got an umbrella saving your hide, now a dead husband, poison, and a possible encore performance. You sure you came to the right brownstone? Wolfe doesn't handle matinee melodrama." Her chin lifted. "I came because I was told you deal in truth, and because my husband left something behind, a document. He warned me it was dangerous. I can't find it. Perhaps the person who killed him believes I have it." I could feel the air tighten. A missing document was Wolfe's favorite appetizer, better than salted nuts. His eyes flicked to me, an unspoken order to keep my wisecracks throttled. "Describe," Wolfe said, "this document." I don't know precisely. Only that he referred to it as the memorandum. He was restless those last days, troubled. He said if anything happened to him, I must guard it, but I never saw it. And now, someone believes I'm holding it back. I didn't need to be clairvoyant to know Wolfe had moved from idle interest to guarded commitment. He laced his fingers, templed them against his bulk, and regarded her like a chess piece recently placed on his board. "Your husband's occupation?" He managed a trust. Industrial shares, investments, private holdings. He had access to accounts. Sensitive accounts, that did it. Sensitive accounts are the bait that lures sharks, and Inez was practically bleeding in the water. I couldn't resist a jab. "So you think hubby stumbled onto something crooked, and now the big bad wolves want to silence both of you?" Her eyes flashed. "I don't think, Mr. Goodwin. I know Wolfe breathed through his nose, slow and long. Then, bah, Facts, not convictions. Archie. Yes, sir. Retrieve the umbrella. Wouldn't dream of it, but if you insist, I fetched it with 2 fingers and laid it on his desk, careful not to drip on the blotter. He leaned forward, peered, and used the tip of a paper knife to nudge back the folds. The dark streak was there, dried but unmistakable. Fritz, Wolfe called, and our chef reappeared, wary as a man summoned to identify a ghost. Bring a small envelope and shears. Within moments, Wolfe had trimmed a corner of the fabric, sealed it in the envelope, and set it aside as if filing a receipt. He then turned his gaze back on Mrs. Vardel. You are perturbed, madam. Understandable. You bring me... He tapped the envelope. A stain. You offer me the death of your husband, reported natural. You allege poison, without evidence. You speak of a memorandum, unseen. And you present an attempted assault in the night. Do you believe me? No. His answer was flat as stone. Then he added, but I am intrigued. Inez gripped her umbrella, knuckles whitening. If you don't help me, I may not live another night. Wolfe shut his eyes, leaned back and folded his hands across the mountain range of his middle. That pose means deliberation. I've seen clients wait half an hour while he brewed a single syllable. This time, it took less. You will remain alive for the next 2 days at least under my supervision. Archie, he opened one eye, you will escort Mrs. Vardel home, examine her house, retrieve any materials of her husband's, letters, ledgers, papers. Do not tarry. Tonight she returns here, to this house. Fritz will assign a room if you think I was pleased about playing nursemaid to a possibly paranoid widow with a killer on her tail. You've got another guest coming, but Wolfe's word in that office is law, and the punishment for contempt is unemployment. Inez looked relieved, which was better than hysterical. She stood, umbrella in hand, and gave Wolfe a small bow that would have suited a courtroom. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. You may have saved my life already. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Archie saves nothing. He spends I ushered her out. But just as I opened the door, the phone rang. Fritz answered and brought it in, extending the receiver with a stiff hand. Wolfe frowned, took it, listened, and his brows knit like 2 angry caterpillars. He replaced the receiver slowly and looked at me. Archie, you will be swift. That was Inspector Kramer. He requests my presence at the morgue. A man has been found stabbed. In the rain that made me freeze with 1 foot out the door. A body in the rain, Wolfe summoned to the morgue, and an umbrella already carrying blood in our office. It wasn't a coincidence. Coincidence is a word we don't allow in the Wolfe household. Inez drew a sharp breath, clutching the umbrella like it was her last insurance policy. Who? She whispered. Wolfe shook his head. Kramer did not say. Only this. The man carried in his pocket a letter, addressed to you. The umbrella slipped from her grip, falling against the door frame with a hollow thud. And for once, the clock on the wall kept right on ticking. The umbrella was still lying on the floor where Mrs. Vardel had dropped it when I closed the door behind us. She hadn't picked it up again, maybe because her hands were trembling too much, maybe because she realized it had already earned more attention than any umbrella deserved. She clutched her handbag like it contained the last beating pulse of her life, and her face had gone pale enough to make me think Fritz might try to sprinkle paprika on her for color. We stepped out into the damp morning, the air still carrying the residue of last night's storm. The sidewalks glistened like polished glass, and the gutters were still murmuring their complaints. A cab carried us uptown, and I spent the ride watching her. She wasn't the type to chatter nervously. If anything, she was coiled tight, every muscle working to keep her composure intact. Mrs. Vardel, I said at last, if I'm going to root around in your house for papers that may or may not exist, you should give me the lay of the land. Who else had access to your husband's study? She gave me a look like I'd asked whether she believed in gravity. No one. He kept it locked. Only he and I had keys. That narrows it down to you, him, or a determined burglar. Or a trusted friend who was no friend at all, she said quietly. The cab swerved past a delivery truck, and she clutched the strap of her bag. I didn't push further, partly because she looked like she was about to fold in half, and partly because I knew Wolfe would want me to let her words stew until he could taste them himself. The Vardell residence was one of those tall, narrow brownstones with a front door that seemed to scowl at the street. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust, which didn't blend well. A stiff old house, like it was holding its breath until it knew whether its master was coming back. She led me into the study. It was the kind of room where money had been spent carefully to look like it hadn't been spent at all. Oak desk, leather chairs, a globe that still listed Constantinople instead of Istanbul. The place had the orderliness of a man who believed papers could be locked away as neatly as thoughts. "This was where he died," she said, her voice low. She gestured to the armchair by the desk. "I found him there." They said heart failure. He was clutching his chest, his head tilted back. I moved closer, scanning. No overturned glass, no scattered pills, no obvious signs of a struggle. But there was a faint indentation on the blotter where something rectangular had been pressed. "You moved something here?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I didn't touch the desk. After they took him, I closed the room. I couldn't—" She stopped, fighting the word. "I couldn't bear it." That, at least, rang sincere. I pulled open the drawers, checked for ledgers, letters, anything with enough weight to trouble a man. Neat rows of files, nothing screaming treason or embezzlement, but in the bottom drawer was a locked tin box. "Key?" I asked. She shook her head again. "I never saw one." I jiggled the box. It rattled faintly, not empty. I tucked it under my arm. "Wolfe will want this. And unless you object, I'll keep poking around." She nodded, perching on the edge of the sofa like she needed something solid beneath her. I checked shelves, rifled through books for hollow cutouts, the kind that always show up in bad novels. No luck. But on the mantel was a photograph in a silver frame. Her husband, a man with sharp eyes and a jaw that looked capable of splitting rocks. Next to him, another man, slightly younger, holding a drink like it was an extension of his hand. "Who's this?" I asked, holding it up. Her mouth tightened. "Arthur Lim. My husband's associate. He worked with him at the trust. He's persuasive. Persuasive enough to make enemies. Persuasive enough to make friends that turn into enemies." I filed that away. I had a feeling Mr. Arthur Lim might find himself enjoying the comfort of Wolfe's red chair before long. While I was at it, I found a folded sheet of paper tucked into a dictionary, because naturally, when you need a good hiding spot, Webster's is always there. The paper wasn't the memorandum unless dangerous documents now included grocery lists, but the writing was hurried, and the words were interesting enough. Ledger entries don't match. "Tell Arthur. Demand explanation. Danger if this leaks. Memorandum hidden." I whistled softly. "Well, Mrs. Vardell, your late husband wasn't hallucinating. Someone was cooking the books, and he planned to confront Arthur about it." She pressed a hand to her lips. "Then Arthur—" I cut her off. "Don't go drawing arrows straight to him yet." Could be someone else didn't want Arthur blamed and decided to cut off the accusation at the root. Still, it's enough to keep Wolfe polishing his neurons for an hour. By then it was nearing noon, and I figured if I didn't get back soon, Wolfe would decide I'd been murdered and start billing Mrs. Vardell's estate in advance. I tucked the note and the box into my coat, and we were headed out when a shadow appeared in the doorway. It was a man, tall, shoulders sharp enough to cut glass, and a smile that didn't bother touching his eyes. Archie Goodwin, I presume. I gave him my best grin, which usually makes people wonder whether I'm about to shake their hand or break their nose. That's right. And you're Arthur Lim, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes flicked to Inez. I came to see if you needed company, Inez. And I find you've brought your own, she stiffened. Arthur, this is Mr. Wolfe's assistant. He's helping me. Lim's smile widened a notch, but the warmth level stayed in the sub-zero range. Helping? Yes, I imagine he is. His gaze shifted to the tin box under my arm. That belonged to Gerald. I should take it, I shook my head. Sorry, pal. Chain of custody and all that. Wolfe gets first look. His jaw worked once, but he let it slide. Then perhaps I should come along. I'd like to meet this Wolfe. That, I said, would be like bringing your own lawyer to a hanging. You don't want it. His laugh was short, sharp. We'll see. Inez's hands were clenched, her knuckles white. She didn't say a word, and I figured silence was her safest bet. I herded her out before Arthur could make himself any more at home. Back in the cab, she sat rigid. He knows. He must know. Gerald discovered something. Arthur's involved. Maybe, I said, but Wolfe will want more than maybe. He'll want blood types, fingerprints, signed confessions, and a side of Trout Amandine. You'll get your answers, Mrs. Vardel, but don't expect them to come cheap. When we reached the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting. He didn't stand, of course, but his eyes went to the tin box like it was a crown jewel. I set it on his desk. He tapped it once, as if considering how best to open it, then looked at Inez. Madam, you have brought me trouble dressed in rain. Now, tell me plainly, does Arthur Lim know of the memorandum? Her lips trembled. Yes. He suspected Gerald was keeping it. He demanded to see it the week before Gerald died. Gerald refused. Wolfe closed his eyes and breathed deep, like he was inhaling the shape of the puzzle. When he opened them, they were cold. Archie, summon Inspector Kramer. Tell him he will want to question Mr. Arthur Lim, and while he fumes, I shall consider what role this memorandum plays in rain, blood, and murder. That's where he left it, and that's how I knew things were just starting to get interesting. Inspector Kramer arrived like a thunderstorm with a cigar. That's not unusual. He always looks like he's ready to smoke Wolfe out of the brownstone if it means getting results. This time, though, he was carrying more static than usual, because the body in the morgue with Mrs. Vardel's name in its pocket hadn't gone away. He wanted answers, and Wolfe wasn't serving any. Not yet. Wolfe sat behind his desk, immovable as a mountain range, the tin box still unopened before him. Kramer jabbed his cigar at it like it was the smoking gun of the decade. What's in that, Wolfe? Wolfe's eyes didn't flicker. If you wish to exercise your authority, Inspector, you may confiscate it, but if you prefer results, you will allow me to examine it first. Kramer let out a sound like a bulldog choking on its leash. He turned to me. Goodwin, what's in that damn box? I spread my hands. Haven't peeked. Wolfe's got me on a strict diet. No opening, anything unless it comes on a plate. That earned me a glare, but Kramer was too busy gnawing on his cigar to push it. He turned to Mrs. Vardel instead. Lady, your husband's got a body trailing him, even after death. You better come clean. She clutched her bag. I've told everything. Gerald had a memorandum. I don't know where it is. I don't know who killed him. Kramer grunted. Yeah, and I'm the Queen of Sheba. He swung back to Wolfe. I'll give you 24 hours. If you don't have something I can use, I'll take that box, and you with it if I have to. When he left, slamming the door so hard Fritz rattled a pan in the kitchen, Wolfe exhaled through his nose like a whale coming up for air. Archie. Yes, sir. Legwork. Mr. Arthur Lim must be pressed, Mrs. Vardel's acquaintances must be identified, and you will discover who had access to her husband's accounts. Go. That was my cue, so I went. Arthur Lim's office was in a tower of glass and stone that tried hard to look respectable. He had a secretary who gave me a smile that could have melted an ice floe, but she stiffened when I gave my name. "Mr. Lim is occupied," she said. "Tell him Goodwin from Nero Wolfe's office is here. If he doesn't want me in his waiting room, he can have me in his office." That worked. Lim appeared a minute later, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He waved me in. His office was neat but not fussy, the kind of place where every paper is meant to look important. He gestured to a chair, but I stayed standing. "Your late partner left a note," I said. "Said the ledger entries didn't match." "That you needed to explain?" He didn't flinch. That was interesting. Gerald was mistaken. He'd been under strain. His health didn't stab him with a knife in the rain, I cut in. And if you're hinting he was confused, I've got a note that says otherwise. His eyes narrowed. "You have it? Not personally. But it exists, and Wolfe will have more than words soon." Lim stood, hands on the desk. "You tell Wolfe this. Gerald was a man of honor, but he misunderstood things he shouldn't have been digging into. If he'd trusted me, none of this would have happened." That wasn't exactly a confession, but it wasn't choir music either. I filed it away and left before he decided to show me the window view up close. Next stop was Mrs. Vardal's circle of acquaintances, which meant a list from her of names and numbers. Top of the list, a Mrs. Edith Carraway, who apparently played bridge with her twice a week. I found her in a parlor stuffed with porcelain cats, and she had the voice of a woman who lived for gossip the way plants live for water. "Oh, Gerald Vardell," she sighed. "So tragic. He was always so tense those last months. I told Inez he was hiding something. Men can't conceal things from women, you know. They think they can, but they can't." "What sort of something?" I asked. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, though there was no one to hear but the cats. "Meetings, at odd hours, with men I didn't know, and there was talk," he confided to Inez once, "that someone was blackmailing him. Of course, she never told me details, but I could see it." Blackmail. That was new. I thanked her, escaped the cats, and went to the next name, Dr. Forbes, Gerald's physician. He was a thin man with a long face that looked stretched too tight. "Gerald's death was natural," he insisted. "His heart gave out. He was under stress, yes, but there was no poison. Inez is overwrought." "Stress from what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Financial matters," he said. He seemed nervous, distracted. I advised rest. He laughed at me. That didn't rule out poison, but it didn't prove it either. I left him with his conscience and checked the last name. A secretary from the trust, Miss Carol Denton. She was young, sharp-eyed, and clearly not thrilled to see me. "I don't know what you expect," she said. "Mr. Vardell was polite always. But yes, he argued with Mr. Lim. Loudly. Twice in the last month. Something about a memorandum, I think. I didn't see it, but I heard the word that clinched it. The mysterious memorandum wasn't just Inez's story. It was real enough to spark shouting matches in the office. By the time I got back to the brownstone, I had a notebook stuffed with contradictions. Inez believed her husband poisoned. The doctor swore natural causes. Edith Carraway whispered blackmail. Carol Denton confirmed office fireworks, and Arthur Lim denied everything while sweating bullets. Wolfe listened while I delivered the package, his eyes half shut, lips pursed. When I finished, he opened them and gave me a look that told me the gears were turning. He tapped the tin box with one finger. "Archie, the key to this box must be found. Within it lies either confirmation or exoneration, and you will obtain it how?" "Ask Lim nicely." He grunted. "No. Search carefully. Begin with the study again. And, Archie." "Yes?" "Tonight. While she is here, under my roof, that was Wolfe's way of planting me on the line between trespass and burglary. But when the big man says jump, I don't ask how high. I just hope I don't land in a cell. Mrs. Vardell had retired upstairs, and Wolfe had withdrawn to his orchids. That left me alone with my thoughts and the box. I stared at it, wondering whether it contained the memorandum, a pile of cancelled checks, or nothing but dust. And then the phone rang again. I grabbed it. A voice I recognized as Kramer's growled down the line. "Goodwin, tell Wolfe this. Another body. Stabbed. Same method. And this time, the victim was a man named Arthur Lim." I froze, staring at the tin box. The circle of suspects had just shrunk, but the danger had grown twice as sharp. The news that Arthur Lim had taken a knife in there. Ribs didn't sit easy with me. For one thing, it trimmed the list of suspects too soon, which Wolfe hates like a spoiled batch of Fritz's hollandaise. For another, it meant we weren't just sifting through dusty ledgers anymore. Somebody out there was making sure the witness list stayed nice and short. I hung up the receiver and turned to Wolfe, who was already swiveling his heavy head in my direction, eyes narrowed. He didn't need me to repeat what Kramer had said. My expression must have broadcast the headline in neon. "Arthur Lim is dead," I told him. "Same style. Knife, rain, no witnesses. Kramer says so." Wolfe exhaled, slow and grim. "That complicates matters." "That's one way to put it. Another is that our prime suspect has taken a one-way trip to the city morgue." He tapped the tin box with his finger. "Then either he died for what lies within this, or he died because someone wished us to believe he was guilty." That was classic Wolfe. Peel back every layer of an onion until you found the stink at the center. He gestured. "Archie." The key. Just a night, which meant my evening plans were about to involve snooping and possibly housebreaking, depending on how charitable you wanted to be with the vocabulary. Inez had already gone up to her assigned guest room, leaving the house quieter than a Sunday pew. Wolfe lumbered off to his orchids with strict instructions that the box remain untouched until the proper means of entry was secured. That left me to plot a little subtle trespass. Around 9, I slipped back to the Vardell house. The street was slick with mist, the kind that crawls under your collar and makes you feel like the world's smallest amphibian. I let myself in with the key Inez had given me earlier and went straight to the study. The room still smelled of lavender and dust, though now it carried a faint undercurrent of something sharper. Fear, maybe, or just my own nerves bouncing off the walls. I started with the desk, hunting for a hidden drawer. Nothing. I checked the bookshelves again, this time tapping spines for hollow thuds. Nothing. Then I got on my knees and ran a hand along the carpet edge, half hoping for a loose board. Bingo. One plank shifted when I pressed it. Beneath was a small recess, empty except for a key on a tarnished chain. The metal was dull, but the size looked right for the box under Wolfe's desk. I pocketed it and was about to close the board when I heard it, the faintest creak upstairs. I froze, heart pounding, ears stretching. Another creak, softer, like someone moving very slowly to avoid attention. Inez was supposed to be at Wolfe's, not here, which meant either I had a burglar for company or someone had tailed me. I reached for my revolver, stepped to the doorway and listened. Nothing now, just the thump of my pulse. I crept up the stairs one at a time, every squeak sounding like a cannon. The hallway was dim, the air cooler than it should have been. A window at the end was open, curtain fluttering. Someone had been here, all right, and gone. I shut the window, cursed under my breath, and went back down. Whoever had been nosing around had probably cleared out when they heard me, but it meant the place wasn't as sealed as Inez believed. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, glowering at me like I dared bring him decaf. I dropped the key on the desk. Found it under a loose board. Also found signs that someone else had the same idea. He didn't look surprised. He never does. "You were observed." "Phooey. At least you acquired this." He slid the key into the lock, turned it, and opened the tin box. Inside were several folded sheets of paper, brittle with handling. Wolfe extracted them with the delicacy of a man turning the pages of a Gutenberg Bible. His lips pressed together as his eyes scanned the first page. I leaned over his shoulder. "What is it?" he grunted. A memorandum, indeed. Records of account diversions, funds siphoned from the trust into a series of shell companies. Names, dates, amounts, Lim's handiwork? Not solely. He flipped a page. See here. Signatures. 2. Gerald Vardell's, and another. He pointed with his thick finger. The name was one I hadn't seen before. Charles Whitten. Who's he? I asked. A member of the trust's board. Less conspicuous than Lim, more dangerous perhaps. As if on cue, the phone rang again. Fritz answered, then brought it in. "Inspector Kramer," he announced, tight-lipped. Wolfe took the receiver. His rumble filled the room. Yes, Inspector." "Indeed?" "Ah. Send him here, then." Yes, at once he hung up and looked at me. Another visitor, Archie. "A Mr. Charles Whitten has presented himself to the police. He insists upon his innocence and wishes to consult with me before matters worsen." "That's convenient timing," I said. "Suspiciously so." "Prepare yourself. He will arrive shortly." True to form, 20 minutes later the doorbell rang, and I let in a man who could have passed for a banker in a lithograph. Tall, spare, with a face carved from polite stone. His eyes, though, had the restless glint of a man cornered. "Nero Wolfe," he said, bowing stiffly. "I need your help." Wolfe didn't rise. "So I gather." Sit Whitten sat, folding his hands. "I know my name is entangled in this matter. But I assure you, I had nothing to do with Gerald Vardell's death, or with Arthur Lim's. I came because I fear I will be next. I couldn't help myself. Next in line for the knife, or next in line for the gallows?" His jaw twitched. "Mr. Goodwin, I am innocent. Gerald entrusted me with sensitive information. Yes, but I urged him to destroy it. I warned him it was dangerous." "That memorandum?" Wolfe asked, soft as thunder before the storm. Whitten froze. "You have it?" Wolfe said nothing. His silence was louder than a confession. Whitten's face went pale. "Then you know. The accounts, the diversions, yes, Lim and I both signed, but under pressure. It was not our scheme. We were following orders." "From whom?" Wolfe asked. Whitten swallowed. "That I cannot say." "Cannot," Wolfe echoed, "or dare not." The man's silence was answer enough. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes. "Archie, see that Mr. Whitten is comfortable in the front room. He is not to leave." Which left me escorting a man who looked like he'd seen his own coffin into the next room. When I came back, Wolfe's eyes opened. "Archie, we are very near the marrow. 2 dead, 1 terrified, 1 widow trembling upstairs. The umbrella, the memorandum, the rain, they are threads in the same fabric. Tonight we guard the house. Tomorrow we unravel the rest." He leaned forward, eyes sharp as knives. "But remember this, our adversary is bold. He kills without hesitation, and he may strike again. We must be ready." That was Wolfe's way of saying we'd just stepped into the bullseye. And judging from the weight in the room, the next shot wasn't going to miss by much. Whitten sat in the front room like a man waiting for the undertaker. I could hear the scrape of his shoes against the rug, restless, nervous, like his body was trying to keep moving even while Wolfe had nailed him into a chair with a single order. Upstairs, Mrs. Vardell had shut herself away, though Fritz had taken her a tray with chamomile tea and one of his miraculous pastries. Fritz swore food calmed most terrors, though judging by her pale face when I passed her on the stairs, it hadn't done the trick. Wolfe had returned to his desk, The memorandum spread before him, and I knew better than to interrupt when his lips pressed thin and his eyes moved across a page like a plough across a stubborn field. Still, the silence had weight, and silence in that office never lasted forever. "Archie," he said at last. "Here," I replied, though it was obvious. "Call Saul Panzer." That wasn't unexpected. When Wolfe wanted quiet surveillance or a thread pulled without fanfare, Saul was the man. I dialed, got him, and passed along Wolfe's instructions. Tail anyone who approached the Vardell house, note anything suspicious, and keep his eyes sharp as razors. Saul, as always, said only, "Right," and hung up. Efficiency incarnate. When I returned, Wolfe gestured at the memorandum. "This document, Archie, confirms large sums diverted. Lim and Whitten were complicit, but not instigators. Someone higher directed them. The identity of that person is concealed, but the umbrella may tell us." The umbrella? That black parasol of doom? Precisely. Why was it attacked? Why, in fact, was it not taken? If a man wished Mrs. Vardell dead, he might stab until his aim was true. Instead, the blade struck once and fled. Why? I frowned. Maybe he was scared off. By whom? The street was empty. No, Archie, the umbrella was not an accident. It was theater. I wasn't sure I bought that, but Wolfe rarely indulged in speculation unless he already had a crumb of bread to lead him on. Before I could press, the phone rang again. I grabbed it. "Goodwin." It was Saul. "Archie, someone's sniffing around the Vardell place again. Tall man, hat low, pacing the block. Doesn't look like a cop." "Keep on him," I said. "Call if he does anything more than window shopping." When I relayed it, Wolfe closed his eyes. The adversary circles. Good. That means he is uneasy. A knock at the door broke the moment. Fritz ushered in Inspector Kramer, who had the look of a man whose patience had been peeled like an onion. He spotted Whitten in the front room, growled, and stomped into the office. "Wolfe, I warned you." "Another man dead, and now you're harboring a suspect. What are you playing at?" Wolfe didn't blink. "Sit, Inspector. If you bellow, you will disturb my orchids." Kramer sat only because standing would have burned more calories than his temper could afford. "What have you got?" Wolfe pointed to the memorandum. "Proof of embezzlement. Proof that Gerald Vardell was silenced. But not proof yet of the hand that guided it. That, Inspector, I intend to uncover before more corpses clutter your morgue." Kramer chewed his cigar like it was gristle. "Then do it fast." He left in a storm of smoke, and Wolfe resumed his stillness. After a while, he spoke again. "Archie, you will revisit Mrs. Carroway, the garrulous bridge player. There may be more in her chatter than we credited. Also, speak again with Miss Denton. I suspect she knows more than she has confessed. Press her." I gave a salute. "So my schedule is gossip and stenography. Got it." The next morning I made my rounds. Mrs. Carroway was delighted to see me. Most people are, though usually for the wrong reasons. And she poured out another tide of chatter. This time, though, one phrase caught my ear. "Gerald once told Inez," she said, "that he feared someone inside the trust board was using him. He said if he didn't obey, they'd ruin him. He didn't say who, but he looked so haunted." That was enough to confirm Wolfe's hunch. Gerald had been pressured, blackmailed into signing, and Whitten's claim of following orders might not have been a smokescreen after all. Next was Carol Denton. She was sharper this time, more defensive. I pushed. "Miss Denton, you told me about the arguments. But you left out something. Gerald confided in you, didn't he?" Her lips tightened. "He said he was being forced to sign papers he didn't agree with. He hinted one of the board members was behind it. I didn't want to be involved. Which board member?" She shook her head. "He never said." But her eyes flickered. just for a second. And in that second, I saw recognition. When I pressed harder, she snapped, "Ask Mr. Wolfe. He'll know," and practically shoved me out of the office, which in our line of work is as good as a signed affidavit. By the time I returned to the brownstone, Saul had called again. He'd tailed the man in the hat to a hotel downtown, registered under an alias, but the description fit someone on the trust's board, Halford Pine. I handed all of it to Wolfe. He listened, eyes closed, fingers steepled. Finally, he nodded. Yes, the pieces align. The umbrella, Archie, was never meant to save Mrs. Vardell. It was meant to deliver her to us, to place her under our roof, where surveillance would be easier and suspicion deflected. Bold, very bold, that sent a chill crawling down my spine. You're saying she was steered here deliberately? That somebody wanted her in this house? Precisely. And now we must prepare. Tonight, Archie, all of them shall gather here. The stage will be set, the actors summoned, and the play will end, Inez, when told, went white but agreed. Whitten tried to protest, but Wolfe silenced him with a glare that could have frozen Mercury. Fritz busied himself in the kitchen, muttering in Swiss under his breath, and I spent the evening making phone calls to arrange the gathering. By 10 o'clock, every suspect would be under our roof. Wolfe had declared it so, and when Wolfe declares, the universe tends to fall in line. As I filed away the memorandum and checked the umbrella still drying in the corner, I couldn't shake the feeling that the rain hadn't stopped. It had only moved indoors. By 10 that night, the brownstone looked less like Wolfe's sanctuary and more like the stage for a particularly tense chamber play. Fritz had set out chairs in the office, though the air was so tight you could have strummed it like a violin. I did my usher act, steering each guest into place. Mrs. Vardell sat stiffly near the desk, her umbrella, still carrying its dried streak of blood, resting by her side like a guard dog. Whitten kept his composure, but his eyes darted to the door every few seconds as if he expected the police to swoop in at any moment. Edith Carraway, all perfume and nervous chatter, clutched her handbag as though it contained the 10 Commandments. Carol Denton arrived reluctantly, sharp-eyed but wary. And finally, Halford Pine, tall, heavy-shouldered, and dripping disdain like rainwater off a gutter, took his chair with a sneer that made it clear he considered the whole setup beneath him. Wolfe presided behind his desk, mountainous and motionless, hands folded across his middle. He didn't acknowledge them at once. He let silence grow thick enough to be uncomfortable, a tactic he wielded better than any weapon. When he finally spoke, it was in a low rumble that carried to every corner of the room. "You're here," he said, "because of Gerald Vardell. His death, his papers, and the stain upon this." He gestured to the umbrella, which looked sinister enough in the lamplight to deserve a mention. 2 men are dead. A third, his eyes settled on Whitten, is imperiled. The cause is the same in each case. Greed masked by rain. Pine gave a short, ugly laugh. "This is absurd. Do you really expect us to sit here while you pontificate, Wolfe?" Wolfe's eyes flickered open, cold and heavy. "Yes, you will sit, unless you prefer to stand while Inspector Kramer places you under arrest." That shut him up, though his sneer lingered. I leaned against the wall, notebook ready. Wolfe didn't need me to take notes, but it gave me an excuse to keep my eyes on every twitch and fidget. Wolfe continued. Gerald Vardell discovered irregularities, large sums funneled through shell accounts. He refused to remain silent. He left a memorandum. That memorandum is here. He tapped the tin box, now open on his desk. It bears 2 signatures, Lim and Whitten. Both, however, were coerced. Whitten stirred, about to speak, but Wolfe silenced him with a glance. Arthur Lim was silenced permanently. His murder was not convenience, it was necessity. To remove one who might confess the pressure applied. Carol Denton's fingers tightened on her skirt. Wolfe's gaze shifted to her. "Miss Denton, you heard arguments. You heard Gerald accuse his associate. What you omitted to tell us was that he named the man applying the pressure. He said, 'Pine holds the whip.' Did he not?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her silence was damning enough. Pine bristled, but Wolfe rolled on. "Halford Pine," he said, voice deepening, "engineered the diversions. He required signatures to camouflage his theft. He used leverage, threats of ruin, exposure, to compel Lim and Whitten. When Gerald resisted, Pine arranged his death. And when suspicion might turn to Lim, he too was removed." The room was still. You could hear the tick of the wall clock, steady now, as if mocking the moment. Pine shifted in his seat, face dark. "Prove it." Wolfe inclined his head. "Gladly. The memorandum shows Gerald refused further signatures. He noted, 'Pine insists.' That annotation in Gerald's hand is damning. Furthermore, Mrs. Vardell's umbrella," he turned toward her, "was not struck by accident. The assailant struck once, then fled. It was performance, a means to frighten her into seeking aid, into coming here, where she could be observed. You, Mr. Pine, required her movements known, and so you arranged an assault, not to kill, but to herd." That was Wolfe's thunderclap. It hit hard. Inez gasped. Edith Carraway dropped her bag with a clatter, and even Whitten flinched. Pine's jaw worked like a vice. "That's speculation," he spat. "Pfui." Wolfe's eyes glittered. "Your man blundered. He left blood on the umbrella, a trace from Arthur Lim's death the night before. That stain was not Gerald's, nor Mrs. Vardell's. It tied the murders together. When I show this to Inspector Kramer, he will see the knife's pattern matches both. A clever attempt at misdirection, but clumsy Inez clutched her umbrella tighter. Then, they never meant to kill me." "They will, madam, if left unchecked," Wolfe said, his tone almost gentle. "You hold Gerald's legacy. That memorandum was hidden to protect you. Pine needed you frightened, dependent, vulnerable. Tonight, he intended to reclaim what remained. That did it." Pine surged to his feet, face red, words boiling, but Wolfe's voice cracked across the room like a whip. "Archie." I already had my revolver in hand. Pine froze, fists clenched, eyes darting to the door like a trapped animal, but there was nowhere to run. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes. "Tomorrow morning, Inspector Kramer will be here with his men. You may attempt to bluster, to deny, but the memorandum, the umbrella, and your own desperation will suffice." "Sit down." For a long moment, Pine stood there, chest heaving. Then slowly, he lowered himself back into the chair. His sneer was gone, replaced by the pale look of a man who knows the game has ended but can't quite admit the score. Wolfe folded his hands. "Now we wait. Archie, see that none of our guests depart. Tonight, this house is less a brownstone than a jail, and tomorrow, Inspector Kramer will have his man." The clock ticked on, steady and loud, as though time itself had resumed its authority. And in the silence that followed, I realized Wolfe had done it again. Built the noose, set the stage, and left his quarry with nowhere to breathe but guilt. The brownstone felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were leaning in to hear the confessions Wolfe was dragging from his guests. Pine sat slumped, his anger simmering just below the surface, and the others clung to their own silences like shields. Wolfe didn't speak for several minutes, which was his way of letting nerves do the work. No one could outweight him, not even a stone gargoyle, and these people were far from stone. Finally, Wolfe's eyes opened, slow and deliberate. "We will proceed," he said. His gaze shifted to Whitten. "You claimed innocence. You admitted coercion. Elaborate." Whitten cleared his throat, his voice rasping. "It began 6 months ago. Pine approached Gerald and me with instructions. There were accounts diverted through subsidiaries. I signed, but under duress. Lim did as well. Gerald resisted, but Pine threatened exposure, disgrace. I feared for my position, my family. I regret. Wolfe raised a hand. Regret does not absolve. You signed. Still, your fear explains why you came here. You expected me to shield you. Witten's shoulders sagged. Yes. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Edith Carroway. Madame, you gossip with abandon, yet you concealed knowledge of Gerald's fear. Why? Edith fluttered like a startled bird. I thought it was just nerves. Gerald always seemed tense, but I didn't believe it would lead to murder. She clutched her bag tighter. If I had known... Pfui! Wolfe cut her short. You knew enough. You repeated his words to others, no doubt. Gossip spreads like mildew. Your chatter aided our adversary, though unintentionally her cheeks flushed, and she ducked her head. I didn't envy her when Wolfe put his gaze on you. It was like being pressed under a magnifying glass. Then his eyes found Carol Denton. She had been holding herself taut, jaw clenched, but Wolfe's voice lanced her composure. Miss Denton, you withheld. You knew Gerald's words. You heard Pine named. Why? She straightened, her voice edged. Because Gerald trusted me. He said if anything happened, I should keep silent unless proof was certain. I didn't want to risk slandering a board member without evidence. Wolfe's lips twitched. It could have been the shadow of a smile, or gas from his lunch. Prudent. Yet your silence nearly cost lives. Still, your testimony will weigh. Carol flushed but held his gaze. I marked her down as gutsier than the rest. Wolfe leaned back. Now, Pine. His voice sank an octave. You arranged diversions. You silenced Vardell. You silenced Lim, but you erred. You left too many threads, Pine snarled. You have nothing that will stand in court. A widow's umbrella, a gossip's word, scribbles in a notebook. On the contrary, Wolfe said smoothly, I have motive, method, and corroboration. The memorandum in Gerald's hand names you. The umbrella bears blood from your hired killer's blade, the same blade that struck Lim. Witten corroborates your coercion. Miss Denton confirms Gerald named you. Mrs. Carroway verifies his fear of exposure. This is not conjecture. It is a lattice, and you are caught in it. Pine's sneer deepened, but he stayed silent. Inez shifted suddenly, her hands trembling as she clutched the umbrella. All this because of money. Gerald died, Arthur died, and I nearly... She stopped, voice breaking. You stole, and you killed, for money? Wolfe inclined his head slightly, not at her, but toward Pine. Men have killed for less. Vanity, position, a whisper of scandal. Money is the commonest of motives. The room simmered with silence again. I kept my eyes on Pine, whose hands were tightening on the arms of his chair like he wanted to crush them. Wolfe exhaled. Archie. Fetch Inspector Kramer. At dawn, he will want his prey delivered neatly trussed gladly, I said, though my revolver was still handy. Pine looked like a man one spark away from lunging, but Wolfe wasn't finished. His eyes swept the room again, weighing each of them. Do not mistake this, any of you. Pine is not singularly guilty. Witten, you signed. Lim signed. Each of you played your part in Gerald's torment. You feared exposure more than truth. That fear bred silence, and silence bred blood. That one landed. Witten's face fell. Edith sniffled. Carol stiffened. Even Inez seemed to shrink. Umbrella pressed against her as if it could shield her from Wolfe's judgment. I cleared my throat, partly to break the tension, partly because my lungs wanted out. So what now? We sit here all night, watching Pine sweat. Yes, Wolfe said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. We wait. The night will test his nerve. And in the morning, Inspector Kramer will complete the matter. Until then, Archie, guard the door. Fritz will supply coffee. And all of you, remain." Pine muttered something low and furious, but Wolfe ignored it. He closed his eyes, his bulk sinking deeper into the chair, as though he had declared the world settled and was now satisfied to rest in it. And just like that, the office became a cell, the suspects prisoners of Wolfe's will. Time ticked on, steady, merciless. I stood by the door, revolver at hand, ears tuned for the faintest stir. Outside, the rain had started again, drumming against the windows like the world was beating time for Wolfe's orchestration. I couldn't help thinking the storm wasn't finished with us yet. The rain outside didn't quit. It thickened, turned from a drizzle into a steady percussion that rattled the glass. Inside, the office had gone as quiet as a church crypt. Wolfe had closed his eyes, which didn't fool me. Behind the lids, his brain was slicing and dicing like a gourmet chef on overtime. The suspects, if you wanted to call them that, sat pinned by the weight of his silence. Even Pine, who usually smirked like he'd been born with one, now looked as though the chair beneath him was rigged with springs. I stayed by the door, revolver holstered but within easy reach, and watched the clock crawl forward. Every tick seemed louder than the last. At 10:30, Edith Carraway broke first. She fiddled with her handbag, then blurted, "Mr. Wolfe, you must believe me. I never imagined any of this. Gerald was my friend. I only repeated what he said because Inez was worried. I never—" "Silence," Wolfe said, without opening his eyes. "You chatter because you're afraid." "Be still," that shut her up. She sagged into her chair, sniffling. Carol Denton, who had been sitting upright with the stiff posture of a schoolmistress, shot her a look that could have stripped wallpaper. Whitten kept staring at the carpet, as though it might produce a trap door. Then Wolfe stirred. His eyes opened, and the room went taut. "You misunderstand, all of you," he said. "I've already deduced the hand behind Gerald Vardell's death. Pine is culpable, yes, but Pine did not strike the knife. That got reactions like a firecracker tossed into a prayer meeting." Whitten jerked his head up. Carol blinked, Edith gasped, and Inez clutched her umbrella so tight I thought the handle might snap. Pine's lips curled into a vicious smile. "Finally," he growled. "At least you admit the obvious." "I didn't kill anyone, pfui," Wolfe said. "You commissioned murder, which is as culpable as the act. But the blade was wielded by another." Inez whispered, "Who?" But Wolfe ignored her, turning his gaze to Carol Denton. "Miss Denton," he said, "you admired Gerald Vardell. Perhaps too much. You withheld his words, not only from fear, but from loyalty. That loyalty blinded you to danger." She flushed, but her voice was steady. "I respected him. That's all, perhaps. But you also knew of meetings, arguments, secrets. And yet, you survived when others did not." That is telling her chin lifted. "Are you accusing me?" "No, but you hold knowledge you have not yet shared. Gerald confided to you that Pine's leverage was not mere financial ruin, but something personal. Did he not?" Carol hesitated. The pause was all Wolfe needed. "Yes," he said for her. "He told you Pine had a man at his disposal. Someone within reach. Someone who could make accidents happen. You knew this, and you chose silence. Your silence cost Gerald his life." Carol's lips parted, but nothing came out. She slumped back, defeated. Pine let out a sharp laugh. "So you admit it?" She knew. She knew and said nothing. "If anyone should hang—" "Enough!" Wolfe's voice cracked across the room. "Do not seek to divert. You are the author of this scheme, but you required a hand to enact it. That hand belongs to another." He turned his gaze to Whitten. "You, perhaps. You signed documents. You feared exposure. Desperation can drive men to extremes. Whitten stammered. No, I couldn't. Indeed, you could not, Wolfe said. You lack the nerve. Your fear would paralyze, not propel. That is why you are alive. The clock ticked on. Wolfe closed his eyes again, then opened them slowly, like a curtain lifting for the final act. The knife, he said softly, was wielded by one who could approach without suspicion, one who could walk in the rain and be near Gerald without question, one who could carry a household item, a simple umbrella, without remark. Consider, Archie. Who fits? My brain clicked. The umbrella. The one that caught the blade. The one that brought her here. My eyes swung to Mrs. Vardell. She was pale, trembling, eyes wide. Wolfe nodded slightly, as if reading my thought. Yes, Mrs. Vardell. The air cracked. Edith shrieked. Whitten muttered a curse. Carol sat bolt upright, and Inez dropped the umbrella with a thud that echoed like a gavel. No, she cried. No, you can't. Wolfe's voice was steady. Cold. You wielded the knife that night. You struck your husband. She shook her head, trembling. I know, I love Gerald. You lie poorly, Wolfe said. The memorandum was his shield against you, not against Pine. He discovered your own diversions, your theft from his accounts. He prepared to expose you. You struck him, then disguised his death as heart failure. When Pine learned of his resistance, you offered him the memorandum to save yourself. But he demanded silence. And so, together, you concocted a theater of fear, the staged assault, the umbrella with limbs blood, so that suspicion would fall upon others while you remained the frightened widow. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Then her eyes blazed with sudden fury. He was going to ruin me, she screamed. He was going to destroy everything. I only meant to stop him. I didn't mean... Her voice broke, collapsing into sobs. Pine sneered. You see? She's guilty. She killed him, not me. Phooey, Wolfe said. She killed Gerald, yes. But you killed Lim. You silenced him to protect your theft. Together, you are bound. Together, you will hang. The silence that followed was like the stillness after a storm. Inez sobbed, Edith whimpered, Whitten muttered a prayer, and Carol stared at the umbrella on the floor as if it were a corpse. I cleared my throat. Shall I call Kramer now? Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing. Yes, Archie. Call him. Tell him the game is over. The storm has passed. I dialed, already picturing Kramer's face when I delivered Wolfe's neat package. Another night, another set of suspects, another performance where Wolfe wrote the ending before the rest of us had even learned our lines. Outside, the rain beat harder, as though applauding his final act. The dawn came grudgingly, the rain still needling the city, though lighter now, like the storm had worn itself out. Fritz had brewed coffee strong enough to restart corpses, and the smell drifted through the office while the suspects, no longer suspects but prisoners of Wolfe's deductions, sat in various stages of collapse. Pine glared holes into the carpet. Mrs. Vardell stared at nothing with eyes hollow from her own confession, and the others kept to their chairs as if any movement might shatter what little composure remained. Kramer arrived with 2 men in tow, all damp collars and scowls. He took one look at the lineup and barked, "What circus have you got going here, Wolfe?" Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. He gestured lazily toward the umbrella, still propped against his desk. Inspector, you have in this room 2 guilty parties. Halford Pine for the murder of Arthur Lim, and Mrs. Inez Vardell for the murder of her husband Gerald. The memorandum confirms Pine's embezzlement. The widow's confession confirms her crime. Both attempted to use each other as shields. Neither succeeded, Kramer grunted, chewing his cigar like it might draw out patience. That true? Mrs. Vardell made a sound somewhere between a sob and a sigh. Yes. It was barely audible, but it was enough. Kramer motioned, and his men stepped forward. Pine stood, blustering, trying to pin the blame squarely on her, but Wolfe silenced him with a single word: "Pfui." It landed like a verdict. They cuffed Pine, and he went red with rage, spitting threats that no one listened to. Inez didn't resist when the cuffs closed around her wrists. She just sagged, as if the fight had gone out of her completely. When the door shut behind them, the brownstone seemed to exhale. Edith Carroway fluttered and fussed about needing air, and Wolfe dismissed her with a curt nod. Whitten muttered thanks and stumbled out, lighter by the weight of his fear. Carol Denton, pale but upright, gave Wolfe a sharp look, half accusation, half gratitude, then followed the others into the morning drizzle. That left just Wolfe, Fritz, and me. Fritz hovered with the coffee pot, but Wolfe waved him off and reached instead for his beer. He poured, took a long swallow, and leaned back, closing his eyes. "You'll forgive me if I don't toast," I said. "Watching two people get carted off for murder before breakfast tends to kill my appetite." Wolfe rumbled low in his chest, something between amusement and disdain. "Justice is seldom appetizing, Archie." "It is nourishing, not savory. Tell that to Kramer." He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon and found the seeds still in it. "Kramer will have his arrests," Wolfe said. "The district attorney will have his case, and the city will have its spectacle. That is sufficient." I leaned against the desk, eyeing the umbrella. Funny thing, isn't it? All this because of a piece of cloth and metal, a widow's stage prop. Wolfe's eyes opened, heavy and dark. "Not funny, Archie?" Symbolic. A shield turned into a lure. A device meant to deceive, but betraying its bearer instead. Murderers always leave such traces. They cannot help themselves. Rain may wash streets clean, but it cannot erase guilt. That was Wolfe in a nutshell, philosophy with a side of condemnation. I let the silence hang, then grinned. Well, at least Fritz can put the clock right again. If it hadn't stopped yesterday morning, we'd never have noticed the umbrella in the first place. Wolfe harumphed, which was as close to agreement as I was going to get. He closed his eyes again, his hand heavy on the armrest, the picture of a man who had returned the world to order and now deserved to be left in peace. I picked up the umbrella, still damp, still stained, and carried it toward the door. Guess I'll deliver this relic to Kramer. Let him put it in the evidence locker. Maybe it'll keep the moths company. As I left, the rain had eased into a drizzle, soft and steady. The storm was ending. Inside the brownstone, Wolfe would retreat to his orchids, Fritz to his kitchen, and me to my typewriter. Another case closed, another round of bills to send, another night's work folded into memory. And if the city kept raining, well, that was its business. We had done ours.